increases rent $1,000 a month. Or I think other things like part about the VAT too is like, will people increase their prices? Will big tech increase their prices? So I think those are two actually separate questions.
Yeah, they are.
So let's start about inflation, like landlord sticking to you on rent and everything going up.
Yeah. All right, so there are three core sources of inflation in American life that are making us unhappy. Number one is housing. Number two is education. Number three is healthcare. Maybe you could swap 2 and 3, but those are the big three. Those are the three that make us miserable.
Right.
Just about everything else in the consumer economy staying the same, even getting cheaper or better. So that's obviously media and entertainment, clothing, electronics, cars, food for the most part. Prices have been fairly stable. And this was even true post-bailout when we printed $4 trillion for the banks. There was not massive inflation. Now, so then why are housing, education, and healthcare getting so much more expensive?
Right.
It's because they're constrained in various destructive ways. So I'll go with education. Why is college 2.5 times more expensive than it was when I was growing up? It's because colleges have added new administrative layers and then just passed the cost on to parents. And then parents felt like they had no choice but to pay it. So then they turn to the government. The government says, here are the loans. And so now we're up to 1.6 trillion in school loans because there's just no competitive pressure on these colleges. They just keep on ratcheting it up.
Right.
Healthcare, similar. Why do healthcare costs just keep going up and up to the sky? Because you have private insurance carriers. Their business model is like, I'm just going to charge you more this year. The employer feels they have no choice but to pay. They eat it. They make it up by not hiring people and turning everyone into temp gig and contractors.
Right.
So like we're paying a hidden cost there. And so there's a principal agent problem too, because if you're the consumer of healthcare, it's not like you're paying market rates. You can't shop around. So housing is the one that, what's his name? This question? That's fine.
Just pull it up. Ed, sorry.
Ed. So housing is the one that Ed's asking about, and housing is the one that people
I always ask about.
people home in on.
Yeah.
The
That
fastest.
makes sense. If you told me I was going to get, everybody's getting $1,000 a month, make the natural landlord would be like, oh, sweet, like I can just jack up rent because people have more money.
So the first thing is that like no sane landlord would ever jack it up by like 1,000. You know what you would do is you might be like, man, I can get away with like a little more. I can get away with like a bump.
Mm-hmm.
So even now, it's not like the landlord's like, I'm going to charge you 100% of your income. Like that doesn't make sense. So even at the most extreme, a landlord would try and stick it to you for like some fraction of it. Let's call it like $300-400 like on the upside. So then let's say they stick it to you to that tune, and you're getting $1,000 a month. You would do like anyone else would do, which is you'd be like, well, let's see what else is out there. That's one reason why all these other markets have remained relatively stable in prices, because it's very, very competitive. Now, housing's competition is getting constrained by the fact that you have essentially like NIMBY regulations that are keeping people from developing affordable housing, and you have limited housing stock available, particularly in robust economic areas that people feel like they need to live in to access certain jobs. So the first thing you do, Ed, is if they say, hey, I'm going to stick it to you, then you say, all right, what else is out there? And you would see if there are other reasonable landlords out there. And if you're another landlord, you'd be like, maybe I'll be reasonable, and then like I'll get a good tenant. But let's say there are no reasonable landlords. Let's say they all try and stick it to you. Then you'd look up and say, okay, I've got $1,000 a month. Maybe I can enlist like a friend of mine. Together we have like 2,000. Maybe there are a few family members. It's called 3,000.
Or a spouse, right? Yeah.
Or a spouse. And then maybe it makes more sense for us to find some fixer-upper someplace, split the house, and then try and get out from under the thumb of these landlords. And this $1,000 a month that we're all getting is portable. It's not contingent upon my living next to where we all work. It actually makes us much more mobile and dynamic and able to make better adjustments. This actually makes it harder to exploit us, not easier. It's not like the landlord's like, ooh, you got $1,000 a month. Now I'm really going to stick it to you. It's like, hey, I've got $1,000 a month. It's like, if you stick it to me too bad, like we can actually adjust and adapt. Yep. So that's the short is that, like, are they going to try and stick it to you somewhat? Yes. Are you now more able to adjust and adapt and like respond and like not be exploited? Also, yes. are there specific issues around housing supply that we should try and help with, like create more incentives for affordable housing development? I am such a big fan of things like innovations in communal housing, and this could be like the guy in me, but I really like the smaller apartment footprints and like the the urban stuff. Like I've been in one of the like a container
Turned into a house.
container turned into a house, and like these micro housings. Maybe I there are probably other people that dig that stuff too, but we or even at like raising a family with Evelyn, like we look up and say, what would really help parents with young kids is if you were like in a place where you cook a meal once a week and then other people cook a meal once a week, and
Communal
like
living stuff.
communal living stuff. Like we should 100% be investing in different ways to try and solve the housing problem. And right now, a lot of it is that the financial incentives all hew in one direction, which is I'm going to make the nicest apartments for yuppies that I possibly can, and because that's the way I can extract maximal financial returns.
Correct.
It's again a situation where, well, like, is this what we want? And if it's not what we want, then we need to create different types of development incentives. Yep. And in many cases, you'd hope to try and help communities address this, because many of the communities end up with local zoning regs that advantage the people with the most clout in those communities, which are never obviously the poor people in that community who are looking for affordable housing. Like it's always going to be like the affluent in a community who want to keep things quiet and the same and keep their property values high.
So that big part of Ed's question is like, won't landlords jack up the rent? If they did, it's still portable, right? Like that's a big takeaway.
It's still portable, and it's not related to your place of employment, which right now is one of the things that's keeping a lot of people stuck in place.
Right. And then on prices, right? Like what's preventing like Burger King from jacking up the cost of a burger?
Yeah, so one of the jokes I tell is like, if you went into your favorite restaurant after the freedom dividends passed, thank you, America, and the prices were 80% higher, it's not like you're cost insensitive. You'd be like, wait, this thing was like $10 yesterday, it's like $16 now? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And then it just takes one restaurant that doesn't decide to gouge you for you to go there, and then all the other restaurants like, oh snap, I guess I can't raise my prices by 60%.
Right.
So you wind up with, in most marketplaces, like competitive pricing, and you saw this again where post bailout, when we printed $4 trillion, there was minimal inflation in consumer products.
Right.
If you look at it, and this is a very, very common misconception. So the three big causes of inflation right now are housing, education, and healthcare. Those are not being driven primarily by people having lots of money, particularly in housing, in healthcare and education.
Right.
They're being driven by market constraints. Mm-hmm. Like us having buying power, it does affect prices at the margins, but it doesn't. It's not the main driver in those three.
You say a lot. The $4 trillion bailout didn't drive up prices.
Yeah, it didn't.
Yeah.
There's minimal inflation. Yeah, and like what's happened in the education thing, it's like it's not like everyone got rich, so like college got really expensive. It's just that they just jacked up the prices, and now we owe 1.6 trillion on it. So the buying power is not driving some of the price spikes we're seeing.
Now, how about this question? I think it was my reaction as someone who's kind of a moderate, at least before I joined, right? And I think you get this a lot. Is Logan asked this question: is like, do you feel innovation will be affected if companies are on the top or taxed with freedom dividend? But also like so there's at the company level question that, but also on a personal level, like, is there motivational work that's affected, right? Like, what if you give somebody $1,000 a month? Like, are people gonna work less? Is this like gonna make us lazy?
Well, there are a bunch of Silicon Valley techies that are supporting the campaign that love innovation. They're literally like almost the embodiments of innovation.
Yeah.
I mean, most people know that, like, Elon Musk endorsed me, but it's not just him.
A bunch of them, yeah.
Yeah, Alexis Ohanian, Sam Altman, Jack Dorsey have all either donated or are supporting in various ways. Some of them might even like ask a question.
Like today,
yeah. So these are people that know that it's a much more positive environment for innovation when people feel like they're participating and sharing in it. Markets function better. Yeah. Everyone, it's just like, it's a really bad environment for innovation, like the winner take all extreme economy, someone like Trump in the Oval Office and people turning on each other. That's a very bad innovation environment. So it's one reason why I have a lot of techies who are behind me, knowing full well. And when I go to some of the techies, I say, hey, we automating away the jobs? Like, oh yeah, we are. And it's like, hey, do you want to like try to pay some more to like keep our society together? A lot of them are like, yeah, I would. It's like, it's not like people are just, like dragons on piles of gold coins. It's like they're freaking parents, they're Americans, they're humans. Like Jack grew up in the Midwest. Jack's like, things not looking so good. So, I want to put words here when words in his mouth. But, it's like they're human beings. They're families. And they know that it's a better environment for innovation if we're still actually excited about it.
And the studies have shown people don't work less. And there's places that...
Oh, yeah, the working less thing. Yeah. Like, so 2 groups worked less when they got extra money.
Right.
New moms who spent more time with their kids, which I don't think we're sad about, and teenagers who graduated from high school at higher levels, which I also don't think we're sad about.
Yeah.
And so someone actually in South Carolina asked me, it's like, hey, what's it going to do to work ethic? And here's like the way I generally feel about it. It's borne out by the data. If you're hardworking now and you're watching this right now and you get $1,000 a month, are you really just going to like stop working? Of course not. Some of you might even work harder because you'd be like, hey, now I have like some stuff to play with. If you're really lazy and you get an extra $1,000 a month, are you still going to be lazy? Probably. You know what I mean? Like, like it's like $1,000 a month does not transform someone's nature. Like, but there are a lot of edge cases where right now people are not working or not trying because they think it's useless. And if you had a foundation, then you might be like, maybe I'll actually give something a shot, right. At least at the edge sometimes. Like, I don't have any illusions. It's like if you're really lazy right now, post-freedom dividend, you'll probably be really lazy the next day too. Like,
right.
$1,000 a month is not, is not going to transform most people's nature.
Right.
But I the data bears this out too. You see a lot of people that are on the edge actually working harder. And one of the things that struck me about some of these studies is that you see kids in particular flourishing more when these families get the money because they become more conscientious. And what conscientiousness is in the context of child development is like, if I do something right, then good things happen.
Yep.
And one of the problems in like a super stressed out, financially strapped household is that you could do something right and then it does not matter. And then you're like, well, it does not matter if I did something right. So I don't need to be conscientious. Like the money actually puts enough of a structure in place where like good things will actually result in like some sort of positive feedback loop, which ends up being incredibly positive for kids' development in particular. So there are so many ways that it would be helpful. It's going to decrease our right now epically high stress levels, make people more rational, conscientious,
right.
Future-oriented, optimistic, more trusting, actually. Like these are all universally well-documented impacts of getting this cash where... And you all can instinctively imagine it. Like, if you're getting $1,000 a month, like, you'd be like, oh. I mean, the first month, you'd be like, yeah, and you'd probably do something, like, a little bit.
But, yeah.
Yeah. But then, like, over time, it would just get the boot off your throat. And then, in real life, it's like, when your kid is screaming or whatnot, like, you have extra reserves to be like, okay, I'm going to be a good role model. And be like, I'm not going to scream back at you. I want to be like, well, why are you upset? Like, what's going on? Or, like, you have, like, a tough day. You're just like better able to respond and make better decisions. I mean, it's not about the money. It's about what the money does for us.
You say that a lot. It's about more than the money.
Yeah, it's about everything but the money. It's about our health, our decision making, our relationships, our kids, our mental health. What we'd want to do with our lives. And the amazing thing is that this is just a popular choice. Like, enough of us get together, we can do it. Like, there's nothing stopping the majority of citizens of a democracy from saying we should have a dividend of $1,000 a month. And you know what's really interesting is, like, I felt this after the debate, is that I think a lot of Americans are waking up to this. They're just like, wait, we can do that?
Yeah. That's
a thing? Like, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's a thing. And then you can almost sense there some people being like, shh, it's not a thing.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's like not talk about it. You know, but Americans are very smart and savvy in being like, wow, we can do that. Like, and then, you know, some people reflect on it too. I'll tell you, the financial bailout really did open my eyes to a lot of things.
That's when you started VFA, right?
I started, like, literally, like, financial bailouts affected me so profoundly where I, like, quit my job and spent 7 years building a nonprofit that was a labor of love for me, and is still a labor of love for, like, you know, like some very, very, like, incredible people that are doing awesome work on it every day. And I genuinely thought, I was like, Venture for America, this is my grand, like, sort of, you know, it's like
legacy.
Yeah, grand, like, or like, yeah, legacy, or the best contribution I can make to society is like try and train hundreds, eventually thousands of entrepreneurial people who will do positive things. Yeah, so
and
the
running for president.
So the financial crisis like lit a fire into me, being like, oh my gosh, like things are. But it also like it really did shake me up. It's like, wait a minute, we just did what for who? Like we just like it's like printed $4 trillion for these guys. Like what the heck just happened?
Right.
And you know, and this country like preaches individual responsibility, and then it's like you have like literally like the lack of accountability was shocking to me. Where you had these people who were getting paid tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, being like, who could know? It's like, well, do you want to give back all the money you've ever made? Being like, because like theoretically you were getting paid to like not let this sort of thing happen.
Yeah, they made a lot of money beforehand.
Yeah, made a lot of money beforehand, and then like they're like none of them just stepped up and were like, you know, like to me like men or leaders about it, being like, well, like I should have known. Like this is probably the grandest screw up in the history of mankind. Like we're wrecking millions of lives. So I should take accountability and walk the plank, but there was zero of that. There was like a like I don't know what happened here.
Make me angry talking about. I want to do so. It's 11:20 essentially. 10 minutes till we take a break. What I want to do, I wanted to like talk about one of the most common things you got was the freedom dividend, and then the rest of the day talk about everything else that you always talk about that I get to see all the time, because you talk about more than just the money. Like you have 110 policies on the website and about a whole bunch of other things. So I want to do this. I'm going to do rapid fire right now. What I mean is like try to answer them as quickly as you can. But
okay,
and I think the rest of the day we can do longer form. But I think this, because there's a lot of like questions people have about the freedom dividend that we don't always get to talk about.
Okay.
Number one, homeless people, they get the freedom dividend.
So when a government, yes, they do. And
Yeah.
when a government agency interacts with a homeless person right now, the first thing they try and figure out is, does this person get some government benefits, because that will help them help that person. With a freedom dividend, everyone will know every person's entitled to $1,000 a month, and you would see massive resources deployed to help the homeless population immediately.
Yeah, that was from Jean Ann. Reese is asking, military, would they get it?
Yeah, of course.
When join the military.
I mean,
of course.
Yeah,
I mean,
you'd be getting it pretty much like before you showed up to the military, and like you go in the military.
We have a lot of policies on it, but I'm just rattling off. Annie wants to know, does it stack on top of Social Security?
Yes, it does, Annie. It stacks on top of Social Security. Social Security is what someone called it's like a forced annuity. And one of the things that moved me towards this was that if you were a mom and you took decades off to raise your kids, your Social Security benefits are lower because you have less of a work history. And we're facing a retiree crisis. 50% of Americans will never retire. Who wants to live in a country where you have old people just working till the day they die and struggling all the time? And we have to shift our economy towards human needs. The freedom dividend stacking on top of Social Security, $1,000 additional a month. So think about that if you're near retirement age, because the fact is most Americans right now will never be able to retire unless we make this kind of move. They'll never retire, so I'm not sure how that's gonna. It's like you'll actually just have them working at convenience stores till they die.
Does everybody get it? That's from John.
Yeah,
over 18, everybody gets it. Rich, poor.
Yes.
Why is it important to give it to everybody and be universal?
So in the Alaskan experience, everyone in Alaska gets the money, and it's universally popular. There's no stigma. There's no I'm paying for you. There's no monitoring. There's no incentive to underreport your income. And so you get rid of the stigma and administration. And if we're funding it through a value-added tax, the truly wealthy will be paying much, much more. So the reference I make is look, if Jeff Bezos is paying billions of dollars into the system, which he would, and then we're trying to send him $1,000 a month to remind him he's an American, that's fine. That's a win.
Yep. I just lost this question, but it was how would it affect tax levels? Would you get taxed on it?
So the freedom dividend itself is non-taxed, but it may push you. So if you're making 50, then with a freedom dividend, you'd be making 62, and so the increment on top, you might end up taxed on, but the freedom dividend itself is not taxed.
Got it. And Denise had a question. Is fun. I think it has two parts. One is basically why is it the same across different areas of living?
Sure.
And the second part of that question is, will it go up? Will it be tied to something
inflation.
Like that? Yeah, inflation or CPI.
Okay, so it's tied to inflation, CPI, which is measurement of core inflation for goods. So it's going to be 1,000, then let's say it's 2%. The next year it'd be 1,020.
Right.
So won't that be wonderful, America? In terms of making it the same across geographies, obviously the cost of living is very, very different in different parts of the country.
Right.
But if you live in a very expensive area, you're frankly choosing to live there often because you can access certain economic opportunities. There are reasons why people are choosing where they live. The other thing, realistically, is it would be next to impossible to monitor people's whereabouts. And we know Americans would be I live in the expensive place, and then go, to the woods. So if you had $1,000 a month, it's portable. It's actually a way to make our population more dynamic in both directions, because there are people who are stuck in very expensive areas that feel stuck that would move someplace less expensive if they have passive income. And there are people who are in less expensive places that are I would actually give Seattle a try if I thought I could try and make it work and survive for a little while and look for something. So it actually ends up helping dynamism in both directions,
dynamic,
but also it would realistically be completely impossible to monitor,
cheaper to implement, right?
Yeah, and you'd wind up with crazy games playing if you were it's dependent upon what neighborhood you live in or something. I mean, you can just imagine that.
Would a couple questions. Kurt has one here, and a couple others talking about the value-added tax being a regressive tax. So does a VAT or does the way you pay for it hurt poor people or people with lower incomes?
Well, in a vacuum, if you just had a VAT, then it might hurt people who are just trying to make ends meet. But if you're putting $1,000 a month into everyone's hands, it increases the buying power of 94% of Americans. The other thing is that you can tailor the VAT so it exempts certain consumer staples. You can have the VAT fall more heavily on luxury goods. There's
ways to adjust it.
Yeah, there are ways to adjust it where.
Tina's asking would it raise price on basic foods for?
So you could exempt various
diapers,
things.
You could exempt.
Yeah, you could exempt consumer staples. You could do a lot of different things. There's so much value changing hands in America now that and you want to go to where the money is.
A lot of questions, or not a lot, but a number of people say, "Why is this not socialism? Why is it not communism?" I've heard you answer this a million times.
Yeah. So this is capitalism where income does not start at zero. It makes markets function better, makes businesses function better. If you're a small business in a community right now, and everyone has another $1,000 a month to spend, you're probably hiring and expanding. This is good for markets. It's good for business. This is not like 1,000 economists endorsed it in the 60s. The CEO of J.P. Morgan just came out for a related idea on negative income tax. So it's this is the least communist thing around. And if you want to get technical, socialism is defined as when the country nationalizes means of production. So that's the U.S. government takes over Ford. That is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about just putting buying power into people's hands.
Correct. So 3 minutes left. Let's have some fun stuff. You? And then we'll do serious, do fun. Would you wear a tie? So we made a lot of noise when we didn't wear a tie. When you didn't wear a tie, which is fun. Would you wear a tie for official business as president?
If I thought it was helpful to conduct official business, of course. It's not like I have some, I've worn ties lots of times.
But you hate them.
I don't hate them as much as people make out. Yeah, if I was meeting with like the head of the UK and someone was like, hey, like they love their ties or whatever, I'd be like, sure, I'll wear a tie. I'll wear it for fucking Union Jack. I don't care. Sorry.
It's only live streamed to the whole country.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine. This is fun. If you could get, I think the last one we wrap, or maybe one more. If we have one celebrity, this is from, I'll find the name, from Nigel. If you could have one celebrity endorsement today, that let's say we don't have, right? We have some that we can't talk about yet or working on.
Yeah,
which is very exciting.
That's very exciting.
But one that we don't have that you would love, what would it be? Or who would it be?
The first person that came to mind, so I'm going to cheat and say two, but like Oprah or The Rock.
Why?
Because I feel like they are some of the most admired Americans today, and I admire both of them, and it would be a delight to have the endorsement of either.
What would you ask them? Twitter comments are funny. What would you ask The Rock if he was like sitting right here? Like out the gate, like what did you say? Yeah,
I would ask him if he can smell what I'm cooking. Kidding.
You should ask him that.
No, because I mean he's the cook of the conversation.
He's the cook.
So I mean, I'd ask him for his I'd probably fanboy out a little bit, so I found myself.
You don't
being
know
like,
really
what's your
fanboy,
favorite?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, it's true. Like, who doesn't love The Rock?
I agree with that. So, America, we're going to be back. What we're going to do is take a quick break, and then we are going to, what are we doing? We're hopping on Reddit for 2 hours. At 11:45, we'll be on Reddit. We're going to start writing. What's that? Maybe 12. But basically 2 hours. So let's say it's on 12 to 2 essentially. We're going to be on Reddit, taking lots of questions. So if you didn't get your question answered here, throw it on Reddit. We'll be doing this all day, essentially. Anything you want to say?
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for tuning in. This is a lot of fun. I hope you're enjoying it half as much as I am. And so we're going to beam back into this venue later? Or no?
Later day. We'll be back on camera at, let's say, 2 o'clock, 2:15. We'll be on Reddit for a few hours. We're just going back and forth all day.
Multimedia, I love it. I actually do really like typing answers.
You do. You do. Like if he's like really tired and doesn't, like he's like exhausted and fried, I'm like, hey, you want to do a little typing? And he'll do it. So,
that's true.
And you do have a reading too.
I like to read and write.
So thank you guys. We'll be back. And the other thing, we won't be talking about the freedom movement all day. I wanted to get that, and we want to get that out the gate. We got lots of other topics.
Really, $1,000 a month would be a game changer for so many of us. And do not let anyone tell you that it cannot be done and somehow going to hurt us. It will not. It will just help improve our lives. And we all can sense that. And then we're like, oh, and we have some creeping doubts. We can do this for ourselves. And after we do it, our lives will be much, much better.
Amen. Thank you, guys. Signing off. We'll be back on Reddit in 15 minutes.